Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the what I consider the highlight of the Blue Marble Space scientific calendar, BlueSciCon. I was actually looking through history where the word BlueSciCon started. And it was actually in 2014 when we were running a podcast before podcasts were cool called Blue Marble Space Science Conversations. And somehow over the years, it morphed into the Blue Marble Space Science Conference. And this was 1 year before the Young Scientist Program started in 2014 with Jessica Nunez as our first graduate. So I thought I'd start this conference with some opening thoughts. And I have to say, I am so proud of all of you YSPs who will be presenting your work today through BlueSciCon and also through your videos that are released on YouTube. You've been at it for 3 months. You started off a little bit shy, not really knowing what you're going to get into, what kind of work it's going to be. And after 3 months of work, I hope during the day that you will sit back and reflect on how you have changed with regards to your knowledge, how you have changed with regards to how you see the world, and how you've changed in how you see other humans. Because the Young Scientist Program, as you've probably realized over the course of the summer, is not just a scientific internship, right? It is a foundation for scientific citizenship because not all of you will become scientists, and that's completely fine. I hope many of you do, but some of you will go into business, some of you will go into education, some of you will go into retail. However, thinking like a scientist will benefit you regardless of the career you will choose, right? The notion of being skeptical about something that someone tells you, the ability to not be intimidated by a large problem, break it down to smaller pieces and put it back together, the ability to focus on an argument, to read a report, to read a paper, are skills that will be beneficial even in the ages of AI. We have challenged you over the summer to think differently. And if Jacob is online, I think he is. Thank you for your leadership in helping our Young Scientist Program participants think about ethical frameworks. Through that exercise, through the whaling exercise, hopefully you all have realized that there are some topics that don't have a right answer, and people will have opinions that differ from your own. And the reason that is because they have a different value system. Too much in this world, people who disagree turn their back on each other and start fighting, when a conversation and awareness of how other cultures think helps sit down at a table and understand differences and make progress. So I hope through this exercise, you will have to come to that same realization and you're able to interact with people positively who may differ from your own opinions about how the world works. Through the leadership of Graham, of Aubrey, and of JD, you have learned how to communicate your science, your knowledge rather, in important ways that differ from just the poor presentations that we've all witnessed throughout our career. There is an art to giving a good presentation. And I hope you have learned a lot about how to do that properly. Because ultimately, if you can't share what you know is useless, right? And so this is why we put a lot of emphasis in the Young Scientist Program in science communication. Your career is going to be a very fun journey as you embark in your new adventures. However, a quick note of warning, there's this tendency in this world that's filled with influencers and brash politicians that you have to be loud and, and obnoxious to make an impact and be famous and make a lot of money. And I'm going to push the knowledge to you that in fact it's the opposite. Those who are quiet and work in the backgrounds are arguably the larger pool of influencers out there. In fact, I'm going to introduce you to an influencer from the 20th century that you may never have heard of. Her name is Barbara Ward, one of the giants of 20th century policies. She was an advisor to many different presidents with an S from all corners of the world. She was living in London during the bombing of the city during World War II, and yet she had an unshakable faith in humanity. And that's why she's one of my favorite authors, because she brings so much hope and meaning into her activities. And this is one of her quotes. She writes, I would say generosity is the best policy, and that expansion of opportunity sought for the sake of others ends up bringing well-being and expansion to ourselves. So as you go about your career, yes, it's important to communicate your knowledge and your advances in your respective fields, but it is not only about yourself, unlike what the influencers and the brash politicians of the world are trying to communicate, right? If you focus on others, you will grow more yourself than you focus just on yourself. Here's another way of seeing this, right? In terms of personal self-esteem, Scott Barry Kaufman is a modern day psychologist. He likes those big words, transcend and self-actualization. What transcend means is just going beyond oneself. And self-actualization just means reaching your fullest potential. And he writes, the key to a healthy self-esteem, which is ultimately what we're all after, is cultivating genuine relationships between humans, not with AI, and building skills and competencies so that you can have a healthy pride in your accomplishments. And that's exactly what you've been doing in this Young Scientist program, right? Hopefully you've been connecting with all of you who are in the program, building this strength of a cohort, connecting with your mentors, building relationships that will last way beyond the 3 months that you have here with us. Graham, Jacob, and I met when we were still in school, and yet we still work closely together many decades later. So the connections you make now, the knowledge you build now, is going to guide you deep into your career. Interestingly, if you read this lovely book by Viktor Frankl, who is a survivor of the Holocaust, he was a doctor before the Holocaust and got a second PhD in psychology afterwards because he thought a lot about the implications. And he was not at all bitter about his experience. So which is why I recommend this book. It's full of hope as well. Tough read though, so warning. But he writes, what is called self-actualization, which means this reaching your fullest potential, is not attainable at all if you focus on yourself, right? For the simple reason that the more one would strive for it, the more one would miss it. In other words, self-actualization is only possible as a side effect of pointing oneself at others instead of each other, right? So there's different authors who have gone through different experiences over different time periods. When you think carefully about the world, you come to that same realization that to be successful, to be happy, you have to focus on other than just yourself. And so hopefully you will take that as a lesson as you move forward. Here's another example to illustrate not moving too quickly and focusing on yourself. Is to slow down, observe the world, reflect, and enjoy the moments that you come across. Go for a walk. And I illustrate this argument with one of my favorite naturalists, Alexander von Humboldt, arguably the founder of the discipline of ecology. And between 1799 and 1804, he traveled to South America when it was still very dangerous to travel to South America. And he spent 5 years writing down everything he saw, everything he touched, everything he smelled. For a long time, he held the record for the highest climb of a human. He almost made it to the top of the Chimborazo volcano in Ecuador. Really cool, interesting guy. And he spent his lifetime digesting everything he learned from that trip into a 5-volume book called Cosmos, the same title of Carl Sagan's perhaps more famous book. And by integrating all his knowledge, he summarized it into one word in German. It's called Weltanschauung, which translates-ish in English to worldview. When you are aware of how everything is interconnected, life, the ecology, nature, it just changes your mindset on how you see the world. Not only how you see the world, but how you treat other humans as well, because you recognize the connections that they have with you. So don't be just go, go, go in your career, right? Like it's important to just reflect and look around, and you'll gain a lot of wisdom from that as well. You're all in universities getting university degrees, but don't forget that your degree does not define who you will become. right? Your university degree just has a slight overlap into your broader interests and passions, and feed those interests and passions. Yeah, here's an example of two people who did that, I think, very successfully. William and Caroline Herschel, two known today as astronomers in the 18th century. Uh, William Herschel discovered the planet Uranus, among other things. And Caroline, her catalog is in fact the baseline of the modern astronomical catalog today. But they were musicians, right? William was a music teacher. He took a pay cut to become the astronomer of the king because he was so good at his hobby, right? Caroline was a singer. You can see here William polishing his mirror, and he did that better than anybody else. And that's why he was able to resolve the disk of Uranus in the sky as opposed to a point of light and identify it as a planet. But they were musicians. They were just passionate about astronomy, and they were able to change the world and their understanding of space as a result. Here's another example, perhaps closer to home today. This is a paper published in 1971. The title is A Two-Color Photometric Method for Detection of Extrasolar Planetary Systems. Very much astrophysics. Written by Frank Rosenblatt. Look at his affiliation. Department of Neurobiology and Behavior. The guy was a doctor, but passionate about space and astrophysics and contributed to it as well, because that's where he had this interest. And he didn't let that go, right? In fact, he's a very interesting guy. I think he's arguably also the founder of computational neural networks, like just broad mind, exploring all his interests among his profession. So yes, your degree gives you some foundational knowledge, but more importantly, it teaches you how to attack knowledge in ways that are beneficial to you. You're not intimidated by learning something new. I think that's the biggest outcome of a university degree is that you can teach yourself. Those of you who've become scientists, as you know from these modern times, it's not an easy career. And the way you make it possible is by not focusing on yourself again. It's by building a cohort of people who work with you and who understand what you're going through, all the challenges and everything. And it is this cohort that allows us to get through the scientific career together. And so many of you will move on from Blue Marble Space in your careers as you move forward, but don't forget that you have a home away from home, right? There are many ways people stay in the organization after their Young Scientist program, or even after they get a permanent position. And there are people who leave and then come back, and it's great. We're always here. We're not going anywhere, and we'll be your scientific family as long as your career goes. Uh, so anyways, today we're celebrating you. We're celebrating your successes, your new insights, your new knowledge, and I just can't wait for what you have to show for us. So I think I'll stop talking. I'm right on time, and let's get the show on the road. Thank you very much.